Are the humanities in crisis? Reports show that fewer students are graduating with humanities degrees, and overall interest in the humanities is waning, but our next guest says not so fast. Neil Lester is a Foundation Professor of English and founding director of ASU's Project Humanities. Good to have you back.
Thank you for inviting me back.
Nice to see you. Are the humanities in crisis?
Well, that depends on who is asked that question and when. I think part of what has to be assessed is what do we mean by crisis. If we're just talking about numbers, how many students are graduating with humanities degrees, I think we have to look at the reality that there are multiple students now who are graduating with multiple degrees. So they're doing a degree in history and a degree in political science. So there's an interesting way in which numbers cannot necessarily tell the whole story.
And yet there's also this feeling out there that there is a search for practicality in a degree. And that it's out, it's out there.
But not just a degree, just going to college, period.
As a way to get a job.
Yes. Well, that is a reality. But I'd like to think that going to college is also about making people better so that we become more informed citizens and that we become more decent human beings and that we understand the world and can become better participants in the decision making around our experiment of the democracy. So that has to be in there too, that it's not just about a vocational education to get a job. There are lots of people who have jobs who may not be happy in those jobs, who may not be content in those jobs, and the jobs can't be the identity. So I'd like to see if we could sort of make that conversation just a wee bit more nuanced.
Okay, give us a couple of nuances here. How are you addressing this?
Well, the way Project Humanities, the initiative that I founded almost 10 years ago, was to try to look at this in a way that we could go into communities and remind people that humanities is not just about disciplines, about what you majored in, that what we are trying to look at is what has that whole experience been like as someone who has gone to the university. So we are just as interested with Project Humanities in those who are in W.P. Carey Business School taking literature courses, or those who come to our hackathon as engineers who are learning something about Humanity 101. So there's a way in which we can look at the whole individual and not just what one majored in. We are not single issue individuals. We don't lead single individual lives. We are complicated and more nuanced than that.
So basically, it should give more meaning to life, what you're doing.
Well, that's an ambitious ideal, but yes. We want to think that people become not only critical thinkers, but they start appreciating literature, and they start recognizing the power in talking across lines of difference, so that we can, an English major can talk to a political science major, who can talk to a business major, who can talk to an engineer, and recognize that there is something that they all have in common there.
I read as well, in looking up on this, that women getting into college and what they're focusing on in college is one of the reasons why maybe humanities aren't seeing the same number of students and or graduates. Was that an accurate profile?
Well, it's interesting because there's a lot of push to get women in STEM. There's a lot of, and in humanities, we've always had lots of women in those because those are relegated, particularly at the undergraduate level, going into teaching, teaching English, teaching Spanish, learning how to read and write. What we'd like to do is to say, let's sort of move away from those rigid expectations and categories to see if we can open students up to possibilities so that the end result of your education is not what job you get, but what kind of experience have you had? What have you learned about yourself and about the world and how you can contribute to that world.
So basically you're saying you can care deeply about the humanities and not necessarily get an English or philosophy degree.
Imagine that you can actually be a business major who likes to go to plays, or a business major who likes to travel and understand about food and culture, to look at ways in which we are trying to respond to the whole person and not just that person who got a degree, who got a job, who has a salary. And that's the end of the conversation.
When you go around the country and you speak to other folks in the humanities and groups, and I'm sure the humanities in crisis is topic A or at least B, when you say what you've just told me, what kind of response do you get?
Well, it's interesting because as I was on a national panel at the Modern Language Association conference, its annual conference, I was on a panel that talked about the future of humanities. I talked about what we call now public-facing humanities, which essentially is to bring the town and the gown together so that we are not just, we like to say the university on the hill, in this case the university in the the Valley who's just sort of talking about how great we are, but we're engaging with communities so that there is a reciprocal relationship between those who are not in the academy and those who aren't. The people who are not in the academy are not necessarily screaming about a crisis in humanities. Now, I'm not saying that we should not be concerned with numbers, but what I am saying is that numbers can't be the only measure of our value and success.
Well, can a measure of the value and success be that an artist can actually make a living as an artist as opposed to a living as X and do their passion, which is art, on the side?
Well, you have to keep in mind also that there is no universal make a living. So what one person can make a living on doesn't necessarily mean what somebody else can.
Yes.
So there's no universal sort of, this is what you need to make a living, because everybody lives differently. And everybody has a different sense of what it means to be a success.
Yes.
You know, I heard Toni Morrison say once that if you're a writer, then you should write because that's your life, not write because somebody is going to make you commercially successful. Success can be fickle, fame can be fickle, but your humanity need not be fickle.
And some of the best artists have actually had outside careers. They've worked in the insurance industry or something along these lines, and they did their art, poetry, whatever on the side, and they became quite famous.
Well, what I like, though, is that people can do both. Somehow we've convinced ourselves that humans can only do one or two things. And we are often juggling multiple things. Like you can do a checkbook and don't have to be an accountant.
Yes.
So you can read a book and still be a mechanic. So what I like to do is sort of not look at this in terms of either ors, but look at this in terms of both and. And that's what I think the new shift that that Project Humanities has offered, is this notion that we can do both. And we don't have to settle for an either or. Now, yes, if I were in a different kind of administrative position, I would, of course, be concerned about student numbers and graduation rates. But I also say that the project that we offer, which is about talking, listening, connecting, workshops, presentations, lectures, that we're bringing those students in who feel more connected to the university and whose success is based on how they feel that they belong in the university. That's what we're contributing to that.
Well, great information. Once again, congratulations on this. Good to have you here. Good to see you again, Neil Lester.
I'm always excited to be here.
Thank you.
Thank you.